Good morning, dear students. Today we shall begin with the third part of the second chapter, that is sectors of Indian economy. In the previous part, we had studied how to calculate the value of various goods and services produced in the three sectors of our economy. And once the value of all the goods and services are added up, we get GDP, that is gross domestic product. Along with this, we also studied about two types of goods, that is final goods and intermediate goods. Final goods are the goods that are consumed by the final consumer and its value is added in GDP. But intermediate goods are those goods which are used by the producer to produce a commodity and its value is not added up while calculating GDP because the value of final goods already contains the value of intermediate goods. Now, after that, we also studied about historical changes in sector. So, in the initial stage, in every economy, primary sector plays a dominant role. But once the economy starts developing, the other two sectors gains importance, that is the industrial sector and the tertiary sector. They start adding more GDP to the economy. Their contribution is much higher than the primary sector. So the topic for today is primary, secondary and tertiary sectors in India. So over here this graph 1 is showing the GDP over a period of time, and as we can see that primary sector is denoted by blue color, secondary sector is denoted by red and tertiary is denoted by green. So we can see over here that during 1973-74, primary sector was contributing more than the other sectors. But over here in the year 2013-14, the contribution of primary sector has decreased and the contribution of secondary sector is much more than primary sector, and the highest contribution is being done by tertiary sector. So there are few questions that needs to be answered over here. The first question is, which was the largest producing sector in 1973-74? So the largest producing sector in 1973-74 was the primary sector. The second question is, which is the largest producing sector in 2013-14? So we already know tertiary sector is the largest producing sector in 2013-14. The third question is, can you say which sector has grown the most over 40 years? The answer would be the tertiary sector has grown the most over 40 years. As you can see, the contribution of tertiary sector has increased many folds. Now, the last question is, what was the GDP of India in 2013-14? So over here we can see that the GDP of India is a little bit more than 55 lakh crore. When we see that between these two horizontal lines, it is almost 1/4 of the difference of those two horizontal line, and as a result the difference between the amount over here is 5 lakh crore. Okay, the second last line denotes 55 lakh crore, and the last line, the topmost line is denoting 60 lakh crore. So 1/4 of the difference would be 1.25 lakh crore. So once we add 1.25 lakh crore to 55 lakh crore, we will get 56 lakh 25,000 crores, and that was the GDP of India for the year 2013-14. So we have seen that tertiary sector is contributing much more. So as a result, the next subtopic is rising importance of the tertiary sector in production. Over the years between 1973-74 and 2013-14, while production has increased in all the sector, it has increased maximum in tertiary sector. This is because of the following reasons. So in the previous graph, we had seen that the production of all the three sectors have increased, undoubtedly, but the maximum increase has been seen in tertiary sector, and there are few reasons why it has increased. So let us study about that reason. So the first one is, in any country, services like police, post and telegraph, banks, insurance, etc. are basic. In developing country like India, government has to make provision for the services. So in any country, few services are considered to be basic, and although it is very basic in nature, it is adding to increase of tertiary sector. The services like the service provided by the insurance company, by banks, by police, all these things are very basic in nature, but it is leading to expansion of tertiary sector. So in our country, the service of police is provided by government. Post and telegraph service is also provided by government. Banks, now we have got combination of both public banks and private banks. Same goes for insurance companies. The second point is, development of agriculture and industry has led to growth of services like trade and transport. Now, as you already know that tertiary sector services are very important for the other two sectors, that is the primary sector and the secondary sector. Without the services of tertiary sector, it will be very difficult to carry out the businesses in these two sectors. As a result, when there was a development in these two sectors, it also benefited tertiary sector. So we already know that Green Revolution was introduced in late 60s. As a result, agricultural output increased, which led to increased demand of trade, that is buying and selling of these agricultural output, and transportation. Goods were supposed to be transported from one place to another. Apart from this, storage was also required for greater amount of agricultural output. Similarly, for the industrial sector, as industries started producing more and more goods, it led to requirement of more and more services. Since income level has increased, people have started demanding more services like eating out, shopping, tourism, etc. So now, since the GDP has been increasing year by year and per capita income is also increasing, as a result, people have got more money to spend. So they demand for various services which was not existing earlier. Like now people love to go out for their dinners, they love shopping, they love going out of station to see various places. So all these things, all these tourism and shopping, all these activities require services that are provided by the tertiary sector. The last point is rise of information and technology has further revolutionized the service sector. So since information and technology has become a lot more developed nowadays, as a result it helps the tertiary sector in reaching out to people, and now these services are more accessible to them. Now the next subtopic is, where are most of the people employed? This subtopic has got two graphs, that is graph 2 and graph 3. Let us see graph 2 first. Graph 2 is talking about the share of sectors in GDP. So again, the colors denoting the sectors are the same. Blue is for primary, red is for secondary, and green is for tertiary. Now, primary sector contributed about 40% of GDP in the year 1973-74. Secondary sector is contributing about 50 till 52%, so it is about 12%. And tertiary sector is providing for about 48%. So it is 40 for primary, 12 for secondary, and 48 for tertiary in the year 1973-74. But in the year 2013-14, their contribution have changed. For primary sector, it is about 12%. For secondary sector, it is about 20%. And rest is for tertiary sector. Graph 3 is talking about share of sectors in employment. So the previous graph was about their share in GDP. Now this graph is about the share of sectors in employment. So in the year 1972-73, about 74% were employed in primary sector. Only 11% was employed in secondary sector, and 15% were employed in tertiary sector. But this trend changed in 2011-12, as we can see here. Now in primary sector, there are about 49% of people working. In secondary sector, 24% of people are working, and in tertiary sector 27% of people are working. So we can see over here that the employment in secondary and tertiary sector has increased, but according to their contribution in GDP, employment percentage or employment share is still less. The contribution of primary sector is less in terms of GDP, but even then there are more percentage of people employed. So graph on the share of sectors in GDP clearly shows a shift in GDP in three sectors: tertiary sector is contributing maximum to the GDP. However, largest employment is still granted by the primary sector. This is because employment rise in secondary and tertiary sector has been slow. Even though industrial output for the production of goods went up by more than 9 times during the period, employment in the industry went up by around 3 times. Similarly, in the tertiary sector, production rose by 14 times, but employment increased only by 5 times. Due to this, agriculture has the largest number of workers. It has more than required number of people. This is called underemployment. Now, as we have seen, the share in GDP is maximum for tertiary sector. Tertiary sector is contributing the most, but employment has not been generated much in tertiary and even in secondary sector. As a result, people are still dependent on primary sector for employment. And when more number of people are working in agricultural sector or in any place, they are termed as underemployed. Now there is this example of Lakshmi. So this is probably the image of Lakshmi. This is the picture of Lakshmi. So let us read. For instance, take the case of a small farmer, Lakshmi, owning about 2 hectares of unirrigated land, dependent only on rain and growing crops like jawar and arhar. All 5 members of her family work in the plot throughout the year. Why? They have nowhere else to go for work. You will see that everyone is working, none remains idle, but in actual fact, their labor effort gets divided. Each one is doing some work, but no one is fully employed. This is the situation of underemployment, where people are apparently working, but all of them are made to work less than their potential. This kind of underemployment is hidden in contrast to someone who does not have a job and is clearly visible as unemployed. Hence, it is also called disguised unemployment. Now, this example says that there are 5 members in Lakshmi's house, and Lakshmi is dependent on rain to irrigate her land, and she grows crops like jawar and arhar, those crops which does not require much water. So all these 5 people are working over here in this same land. Everyone is doing something or the other, but no one is fully employed. They are not working according to their full potential. They are doing only a limited amount of work. So this kind of situation is known as underemployment or disguised unemployment, because the person is not visibly unemployed. The person is doing some work, but if that individual is not working there, even then it is not going to affect the output in any way. Now, supposing a landlord, Sukhram, comes and hires 1 or 2 members of the family to work on his land. Lakshmi's family is now able to earn some extra income through wages. Since you do not need 5 people to look after that small plot, two people moving out does not affect production of their farm. In the above example, two people may move to work in a factory. Once again, the earnings of the family would increase and they would also continue to produce as much from their land. Now, if someone hires two people from Lakshmi's family, it is not going to adversely affect the agricultural output of their land. The output of the land is going to remain the same, but their family is going to benefit through the wages those two members are going to earn. That is going to be some extra income in addition to the income that they used to get from that agricultural land. Although underemployment can be seen in huge amount in agricultural sector, it is also prevalent in other sectors. For example, there are thousands of casual workers in urban areas who work on daily basis. They are employed as painters, plumbers, and others doing odd jobs. So underemployment basically it is mainly seen in agricultural sector, but it is not that it is only confined in agricultural sector only. There are few workers who work on daily basis. So some days they get work, the other days they do not get work. There are some people who work as painters or as plumbers. So these people they are called whenever they are required. As a result, for some day they might be earning more, the other days they might not be earning much. So that is it for today. These are the two assignment questions. The first one is, what is underemployment? Explain with an example. So you need to explain the situation of underemployment through an example. The second question is, why should we be worried about underemployment? Now you need to explain why underemployment is not a very good thing. Why is it a very negative situation? And I'm sure you will be able to answer this question once you try to recall whatever you have studied in previous year in the chapter People as Resource. This is a very easy question. So that is it for today. Thank you.